Okay, wrapping up economics. Apologies for all the videos. There's so many videos, and I know it's a lot to watch. And I'm not a stickler for when you get it done. So if you get into next week before you get it all done, don't worry. Just go ahead and keep watching. But it is going to be on the test. So I mean, that's what we're here to do. Is to get this stuff communicated the best we can, and then we'll have discussions. If you want to write back and say what's going on, hopefully we'll be able to do that. You can do videos too. You can write me emails, whatever you need. In any case, here we are done with economics. We're just wrapping it up here. The world system, as described by Wallerstein, began in Western Europe in 1492 and is synonymous with colonialism and capitalism. Now, capitalism started, of course, much earlier than that. We could say maybe the 1100s, and then banking, sort of the banking part of capital and interest-bearing loans and all that, joint stock companies in the 1300s, 1400s. But really, this sort of global system comes about with the age of European colonialism. So it's the same system. We're still there. Nothing's really changed. It may be kinder and gentler, but it's still the same brutal exploitation taking place, both of foreign colonies and also of domestic workers. Inflation drove colonialism, leading poor Europeans to seek the periphery, the frontier, as an escape from debt. Um, Poor Europeans, remember the young man going off to work in the colonies, in the conquest, to be able to buy his ancestral home back. Here's Cortez. Uh, this is also from uh, what's his name, David Graeber. Um, so this is Cortez, the butcher of Tenochtitlan. He had his victory after 3 years, 8 months of grueling house-to-house warfare, killing 100,000 Aztecs. One of the greatest cities of the world is totally destroyed. Um, the result among the men was outrage. The officers connived to sequester most of the gold. The final tally was announced. The troops learned that they would be receiving only 50 to 80 pesos each out of all that gold. Um, um, a musket cost 100, a horse cost 800 or 1,000. These are wildly inflated prices, of course, because there's inflation, because there's so much extra money. There's quacks giving them uh, health care. Uh, Endless petitions for loans and advances in pay, and trying to get rid of these soldiers. The Indians are all slaves. Their faces covered by names, so they're tattooing the names on the Indians. Their faces covered by names like so many counter-endorsed checks. The mines surrounded by miles of rotting corpses. We are not dealing with the psychology of cold, calculating greed, but of a much more complicated mix of shame and righteous indignation, and of the frantic urgency of debts that would only compound and accumulate. These were almost certainly interest-bearing loans, and the outrage at the idea that after all they had gone through, they should still be held to owe anything to begin with. And what of Cortez, the greatest theft in world history? His original debts had now been rendered inconsequential. He did this totally without any orders. He just sort of formed an army and went and attacked. He was actually ordered not to. He had no official role in this, but he did it. He did it anyway, and it was successful. He was a big, big, big crook. And creditors were already starting to repossess his holdings while he was off on an expedition to Honduras in 1526. All I've received has been insufficient to relieve me from misery and poverty. I have a debt for 500 ounces of gold, and I don't have a single peso. He had a personal palace at the time. But a few years later, he was reduced to pawning his wife's jewelry to help finance a series of expeditions to California, hoping to restore his fortune. So you can see these people are all in debt up to their eyeballs. You've got you've got so much cruelty and violence sustaining the system. You've got uh, rich Europeans who are these younger brothers, right? These younger brothers who don't stand to inherit anything, who are heading out Um, Today, we would say this is foreign direct investment. Basically, when Wall Street, as is now, is in a bear market, you can put, if you have $1 million, you can put it in Wall Street, and next year you'll have 950,000. Maybe you'll have $1,020. There's no growth going on at home. So you seek, you take a tenth of it and put it in Ethiopia, and you take a tenth of it and put it in South Africa. You take a tenth and put it in Brazil or whatever. You spread out, and you try to find a hedge, an investment that when the market is falling, that it's rising, to block off your losses a little bit. And still make some money, and so that's why we seek the colonies now, the emerging markets, or the poor countries, and that's what rich Europeans were doing back in the 1600s or the 1800s, or the early 20th century. So investments in the peripheries were very cheap and potentially very rewarding, or at least they rose and fell in different cycles and in the center. That's key. The poor, of course, are just seeking an escape, right? Prior to everyone's Social Security number being attached to every loan, you could just write it off, and so you would see a barn in Tennessee. These people have doubled down, right? They came all the way from Portugal or whatever, and they're still here, and they got the big sign on the barn. I'll hold it up there, GTT. Gone to Texas. So we've loaded everything of value onto a cart and lit out last night at midnight. And you, creditor, getting here at 8 a.m., we're long gone. You can have the land, you can have whatever's left, but you can't have our future labor. We are out of here. And so this is what the frontier becomes, right? The frontier becomes New York and Boston trying out new investments in Missouri or in Oklahoma or Wyoming or whatever, and then you have heavily indebted poor people going out and doing the grunt work, and that's it. That's colonialism, and it continues to be the case. And if you are drowning in debt today, and you get your bachelor's degree, you can teach English in China or in the Middle East and make ridiculous, crazy amounts of money, the same way that your ancestors would have gone to the New World. So financialization, Britain becomes a banking center as a result. It remains a banking center. The city of London. This is where insurance companies go to get their own insurance, the reinsurance, and where all money comes from. It's a tiny country. It's like 50 million people, 60 million, something like that. The UK is, but they have their own reserve currency, which the only other countries that have that are the Eurozone. The United States, of course, is the number one country that has its own currency. Most places in the world, when you spend money, you're only spending stuff that just can buy stuff within that country. When you go and you spend $1 for a pack of gum in the United States, you're paying actual, real foreign currency that is accepted anywhere on the planet, and that's a really weird thing. They do that in Europe with the euro. They do that in Japan with the yen, and they do it in England with the British pound. It's a reserve currency. Governments actually see these currencies as valuable, and their own currency is really not holding any kind of value. The reason why China has so many dollars is because they're trying to buy valuable assets. They believe in America. They believe in America so much they spend billions every year buying U.S. Treasury bonds and propping up our economy. So the capitalist legacy, destruction of indigenous worlds, population declined in the New World between 1492 and the 19th century, but began rising again in the 20th century. Today, there are more Native Americans living in the United States than have ever lived in this space ever in the history of Ohio. Or I don't know about necessarily Ohio, but definitely throughout the entire United States, there are more Native Americans here than there have ever been. They're just still a very small number in relation to all of the immigrants. Indigenous removal. Settlers got the best land. The indigenous were transported to the least valuable lands. The greatest success at resisting colonialism has come from larger, more complex chiefdoms that were able to provide a threat to the white settlers or assimilate on their own terms. The places where native people were just completely wiped out uh, are the places that are um, most filled with anti-native racism. You see places where they were stronger, more powerful. They could resist um, white settlers. Then you see today a little more of equality between indigenous people and the immigrants. Okay, thanks a lot. See you next week. Gotta go make some more videos for some other classes.